So Spalding wants to do basketball with a sensor inside of it. It's actually for coaching. So the idea is they've baselined some professionals like Steph Curry doing certain drills. And they can say this is the force that it hits the floor with, or this is how many dribbles he would do between cones, or the spin rate on his shots. And so they can sense that with the sensor buried right into the center of the ball. Because as you know, for a ball, it has to rotate very evenly. And importantly, it has to bounce evenly and effectively.
Welcome to another episode of The Bomb, Engineering a Path Forward. I'm your host, Magenta Strongheart, and I'm going to ask you to look around your desk, bedside table, or whatever you charge all your devices with. How many of those charge wirelessly? As a listener of this show, it might be all of them. In today's episode, we're going to explore the amazing possibilities in wireless power and charging with a pioneer in the field, Jacob Babcock. Jacob is the CEO of NuCurrent, the world's leading wireless power technology company for high efficiency and compact sizes. Today, Jacob will tell us how he transitioned from law student to electrical engineer, the challenges of designing NuCurrent's innovative new Spalding smart basketball, and why mentorship and a strong network are crucial at every stage of your business. This is my conversation with Jacob Babcock, and this is The Bomb. We live in a time where design and technology touch every aspect of our lives. But where did it all come from? Who designed it? How was it built and brought to market? What will it look like in a year, 2 years, 100 years? From the phones and smartwatches that help us in our day-to-day to the cutting-edge spaceships and 3D printers that are leading us into the future, modern design is constantly shaping the way we work, communicate, problem solve, and play. And every new design, big or small, starts with an idea and a bill of materials. I'm Magenta Strongheart, and this is The Bomb, where we talk to leading innovators in the tech world and celebrate the transformational power of design. Jacob, welcome to The Bomb. Thank you for joining us today. Super excited to be here at M-Hub, a space that I've heard so much about over the years, and we're going to be learning about more later today. How was your morning getting here? How are you doing?
It's great. My office is about 5 blocks away, and I love coming here. I'm a board member here as well, so it's great to go back and forth.
Nice. Welcome. Well, we're excited to get into everything about NuCurrent. I'm excited to learn more and also about your position as a board member here. And I think it'd be great to just kind of start with a little bit about your origin story, like how you got into engineering and this space and hardware and running NuCurrent and founding it. About 15 years ago, right?
Yeah, so 15 years ago, I was in law school at Northwestern, not a typical engineering hardware starting point, but I was in law school at Northwestern and I took a class in design thinking around medical innovation. And because we were focused on implanted medical devices and wirelessly charging those for our class project, we got into the position where everything we did had to work perfectly because you can't mess around with pacemakers and spinal cord stimulators. And when the class was over, that really led to us realizing that we had developed something that was really magnitudely different than anyone else had done up to that point in wireless charging. And so we saw opportunities in areas initially like mobile phones, computers, and automotive charging phones inside of cars. And we branched out from there. And then, this is the really fast version of the story, but today we have really pioneered wireless charging into multiple fields like industrial devices. So if a UPS driver drops off a package for you, they're going to scan it using a computer from Honeywell that uses our wireless charging.
Wow, okay.
Right now, when we're filming this, there's a PGA championship right now. Probably half those players are wearing Whoop devices. We wirelessly charge those.
That's
so
awesome.
It's really cool that we've expanded from that medical place. And it was a very circuitous path. And I'm not an engineer, and my younger brother is a mechanical and electrical robotics engineer from Carnegie Mellon. And I always ask him how, could I cut it? And he's like, if the question's about wireless power, you're really deep. Everything else you don't know anything about. So, if we keep it there, I can answer the electrical engineering questions.
Well, then it sounds like you've learned a ton over the years, I'm sure, as far as that goes. On the early team, when you were working on those prototypes for the medical device in school, were you working with engineers, or what was the kind of split with the team in that class?
Yeah, in the class, it was actually, it was the second type of class like this in the country. So the first one started at Stanford and kind of very similar at Northwestern, where there's really strong schools, grad schools in medicine, engineering, business, and law. And so we had an even distribution of students from those 4 different schools. So I was one of 2 students from the law school, and then we had 2 MBA students, we had 2 Masters of Engineering students, and then 1 medical student. So the 7 of us were responsible for the class project.
And so at that time that you guys were developing this and you kind of learned, like you said, you recognized there's this bigger opportunity maybe beyond just this one medical application. What was existing on the market at that time as far as wireless charging? Like obviously now people are familiar with, their phone is probably the most common example, throwing your phone on the pad to charge it and that sort of thing. But at the time, what was kind of out there that people would have been familiar with?
Yeah, no one really thought in terms of wireless charging, but the technology did exist. And so probably the most common thing was toothbrushes.
Okay.
So toothbrushes have been wirelessly charged since like the early 2000s.
That's so interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah,
but it makes sense. Now that you say it, I'm like, yes.
And it's such a perfect application because they're used in, water-rich environments, obviously. They need to be clean. You can't have like bacteria build up on them.
Right.
And a lot of physical connectors have a lot of... they're dirty. A lot of gunk gets inside your iPhone.
Just deal with all that.
Yeah. The normal connectors are also very failure prone. And so for toothbrushes, it was perfect, not only because the application benefited from having like a fully sealed plastic encased device, but also because toothbrushes charge super slowly because it's very basic technology. But it doesn't matter because, if you're really good on your oral hygiene, you brush your teeth about 6 minutes a day, And so
those are the super users.
Yeah, right. And so you're talking about like basically 24 hours a day they can sit on their charger.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if it's only doing like 100 milliwatts at a time.
Yeah.
Now for newer devices, phones that want to charge at 15 watts
and you wanted to charge fast, or maybe overnight you have that opportunity. But a lot of the times you're like, I need this really quick and that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's fast charging applications and people are used to wanting to, charge their wearable quickly when they shower so that they don't have to miss a workout without having their Apple Watch on or whatever the case may be.
Can you tell us a little bit more about like that conversation, the turning point of deciding we're going to like start a company, as far as from the class project to there's this great opportunity? Was it the same people that you were working with that went into NuCurrent at the beginning? Was there some shifting of all of that? What was the kind of the moment?
Definitely not straightforward. There wasn't a moment.
Just a lot of moments together.
Yeah, a lot of moments. And there wasn't even a light bulb moment for the innovation. I mean, today we have close to 400 patents and there wasn't like a one aha moment. There were some very depressing depths of like scariness, like, oh, we can't make it work. And then we found ourselves back into a corner and we had to innovate our way out of it. But as far as going into the company, we just kind of rolled it forward. I think one defining moment for the team, the class project team, was we won the Northwestern University Venture Challenge that year. 15 years ago, that was kind of a newish thing. Like now I feel like every university has these every
has some
year.
venture program,
That was like in its third year or something, but we won that. So we won a little bit of money, but we also won some confidence. Like,
that definitely
54
helps.
Northwestern teams we're the best. So we that gave us some confidence. At that point, a few people said, hey, it's just a class project, I'm done. And a few people wanted to keep moving forward. And then over time, it's been a long build. It's been a lot of twists and turns. So over time, I'm really the only person that still is around from that original group. 3 other people stayed involved for multiple years. And then 3 people kind of stopped right away.
Okay. Maybe we can get a little bit more into a deep dive of the technology as much as you're willing to share.
Sure.
We can maybe start with like wireless charging for beginners, and then as kind of detailed as you're willing to share about kind of some of the innovations you guys have worked on. So some of our more, knowledgeable audience members can also get a kick out of that.
Sure. So I know you have a pretty sophisticated audience of, engineers and product managers. So I won't start at the 0 level, but I'll start at the 100 level. So, we're in Chicago today. We're about 2 miles away from the location of the 1893 World's Fair, where Nikola Tesla did the first ever demonstration of wireless power. So this has been going on for over 130 years. What he essentially showed was a transformer that can transfer, when you have a magnetic field induced on the primary side, and then you put a receiver that's tuned a particular way in that same magnetic field, it can harness that AC, and then, through rectification, you can convert that into a DC, and you can turn on a light bulb. So he showed that with a 2-meter coil on one side, a 2-meter coil on the other side, and a 2-meter gap in between.
Wow.
And he showed that you can send power from here to here to light a light bulb. And really, the physics hasn't changed. That's the same.
You've just been able to make it a little smaller than 2 meters, just slightly.
Much smaller, much cheaper, much more efficient, safer, do data over the same link. So these are some of the innovations that had to come into being. And earlier you asked what existed when we started down this path. Toothbrushes did, but they really just did basically what Tesla did in smaller packages, but it all scaled. So like it was also really low power. What the innovations require now for these more advanced electronics applications and miniature devices and irregular shaped devices is what had to be brought into the market. And interestingly, like 120 years after that first demo, there hadn't been much progress. But in the last 10, 15 years, there's been a huge wave of progress in this entire industry. I mean, we're pioneering that and we're a big part of that, but we're not the only ones. There's been a lot of progress here.
Yeah. We hear about it all over in all these different applications nowadays. And I think both from like the consumer side to kind of behind the scenes things we're aware of that are happening in larger kind of industrial cases. There's some really interesting projects I saw when I was checking out NuCurrent's website and your portfolio. Okay. So I'd love to hear about some of your favorites. The one that caught my eye was the Spalding basketball project, but we don't have to only focus on that. That's if there's something else you're excited to share about.
Going back to our roots, it was a class focused on design thinking. So with design thinking principles, you always want to start with the problem and you want to focus most of your effort on really defining the problem. And so,
which is huge that you guys were doing that as young entrepreneurs, because that's something I hear all the time. Sorry to interrupt, but with kind of like VC investors talking about pro tips and these kinds of things, are like, we see founders all the time that are really married to the solution, but they have not. Now they're trying to find a problem for it. Totally. So that's amazing that you guys were focused on that from the jump. And also, again, like shout out to that class because they really helped set the right tone, I think it sounds like.
It's been a huge differentiator between us and basically all these come and go wireless power startups. So there's been so many companies that spin out of Caltech or MIT or Stanford or wherever, and they have a cool, neat idea for wireless power. And oftentimes they're like academically interesting, but then they have one solution that's relatively narrow and they have to go find the problem that they solve. Yeah. And they raise a round of venture funding and then they go away. And we've seen that story a dozen times in the past, decade.
So tell us more about the Spalding project. What did they kind of come to you guys with, and what did you end up with delivering? Yeah,
so Spalding wants to do basketball with a sensor inside of it so that you can, it's actually for coaching. So the idea is they've baselined some professionals like Steph Curry and doing certain drills. And they can say, this is the force that it hits the floor with, or this is how many dribbles he would do between cones, or the spin rate on his shots. And so they can sense that with the sensor buried right into the center of the ball. Because as you know, for a ball, it has to rotate very evenly. And importantly, it has to bounce evenly and effectively.
Yeah, you don't want anything that's messing up the balance of the ball. That would be totally detrimental to the rest of what you're trying to do.
And the early prototypes, sure enough, weren't even workable because the other thing you can't do is you can't put a plug on a basketball. Yeah. That's just like a non-starter. So they did try to do basic wireless power. They put an antenna right underneath the leather cover. And because that's where it had to be in order to effectively pass wireless power, because they didn't know how to do it with smaller antennas or greater distances. And so what the problem with that is like it bounced okay on, I don't know, call it 9 of the 10 panels. But when you bounced it on that one panel that had an antenna about the size of a hockey puck underneath it, it was like a dead bounce.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And so it didn't work. And so they came to us and they said, hey, the sensor works, but we can't recharge these things reliably and get a good quality product. Can you help us move the wireless charging into the middle of the ball, so increase the distance? And can you do it with a much smaller and lighter receiver technology? So we were able to do that. We did do it. One really interesting thing came up for us at that point, which was we had never really thought about measuring angular misalignment. So we had always thought in terms of 3 dimensions. So X, Y, and then Z. And with a basketball,
like that, it's always going to be sitting on one flat side.
Flat.
Basically, you can expect which side it's going to be landing on the pad with.
Yeah, it's going to be flat. It's flat things charging flat things is what it was at that time. And so it could be planar misaligned or it could be distance misaligned. But we never thought about theta and how orientation a coil could, instead of being perfectly perpendicular, could then start changing. And so like even just things like, how do you develop test fixtures for this? How do you model this? Because the simulation tools really couldn't handle that.
That really challenges your whole prototyping process, because I was reading a lot about how the simulation tools are what kind of help you guys be super quick and be able to, test these things even before you're building the prototype. And so, I can imagine that's a big challenge. You're like, okay, we got to fix these tools even too.
Yeah. And it's just a good example of like how we went into that saying we can probably do this, but we don't know what all the problems are going to be. It introduced a new problem. And sure enough, today we do a lot with irregular shaped objects. So styluses are not flat. Earbuds are not flat. Headsets, like the band in the top is kind of flat, but not really flat. And so thankfully we had developed that angular misalignment simulation capability, fixturing capability, and knowledge. Yeah, and now we can roll it in, and it's to the benefit of all of our customers that we can do these things much faster.
Absolutely. I can imagine that's a game changer. And so where's the product at today? How's it going? What are they using it for? And
I don't know if I ever dreamt about how broadly it would be deployed in terms of different areas. It's really incredible to see all the different industry uses. So we're supplying the top companies in PC peripherals, in audio. So when I say PC peripheral, I'm talking about like mice and keyboards, video cameras. When I say audio, I'm talking about headsets and earbuds. Smart glasses is about to become a huge thing. I mean,
we saw a lot of that at CES this year. We were visiting the Facebook, Meta
Ray-Bans
room. The Ray-Bans release. I feel like every other booth was talking about the glasses.
Top of the iceberg.
I'm sure.
I believe, and I think this would be interesting to your audience, but I believe based on what I've seen in consumer electronics, just as a user, but also running this company for 15 years, I'm pretty confident I would take a bet that if we did this conversation 10 years from now, we might not even be carrying phones anymore. I think phones will be completely disrupted by smart glasses and other on-body wearables. Because if you think from a first principles perspective, what advantage does a phone have compared to something that is like sitting on your nerve center? Like all 5 senses are right here on your face. So why would a phone that sits in your pocket be any better? Now that computing power is being offloaded to the cloud via 5G. Sensors
now you don't need the memory chip in your body anymore. No more chip embedding necessary for the ideas of those kind of crazy
Neuralink
sci-fi.
Sci-fi. That might come along too, but I give that more like 30
sci-fi
years.
Technologies. But definitely. I mean, the cloud, like you said, is also a huge part of that potential for those innovations. Well, maybe we'll do a follow-up in 10 years and see where we're at.
Sure, sounds good.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to hear from Jacob on having over 400 patents for the developed technology and how it's not necessarily the key to a successful future. Welcome back to The Bomb. I'm your host, Magenta Strongheart. When we left off, Jacob was only scratching the surface of what the future might look like when we think about the possible applications for wireless technology. I want to shift a little bit to speaking of kind of just this, like the innovations that you guys really own and have really kind of carved this place out where you're able to provide this to your customers, your expertise and kind of specialty. You mentioned earlier you guys have over 400 patents. Your law background, I'm sure, came in handy with some of managing this side of things. I'm always interested because we talk a lot with startups, of course, at different levels, and kind of sometimes in technology you're competing with these kind of tech giants. And there's conversations around like, when is it worth it to patent or deal with that versus not? And obviously there can be a lot of hassle if you end up in, a battle with somebody else who's trying to also, protect that innovation or something they're working on. Obviously, these cases are very nuanced, so I know there's not one size fits all, but I'd love to hear more about your experience managing patents and how that's always been a core part of the company to develop these kind of, these private innovations that is your core technology. So
yeah. I have this conversation at least once a week. I love mentoring other entrepreneurs, and this is certainly an area where I have a lot of experience in entrepreneurship. So this is a common problem for every technology entrepreneur I know. Now, there's a little bit of a difference between being a software company and being a hardware company.
Definitely.
Software is a lot harder to patent. It's not impossible. You have to be strategic about it. But I would look to different intellectual property protections in that case. But for let's assume hardware, this is the bomb, right?
Yes.
So we're talking about bill of materials, like actual cost of goods sold, physical product. My recommendation is that every company building physical product should have a baseline of IP. The baseline can be 1 or 2 core patents. It doesn't need to be very robust and super expensive. But I think everyone should lay down a foundation, mostly for future optionality, so that a few years later, if a big company wants to buy them, or if they have hit it big on something, they can go back to those prior art dates and they can write continuation applications.
Right. They're not
really,
going to regret that they didn't do it in the first place.
Lay a line in the sand on your date, write a really robust specification, be really good at disclosing a lot into that patent so that in the future you can go back and take advantage of that really good disclosure. So most of the time, I'd say 80% of the time, it's getting a baseline laid for future optionality. And that's how I think companies should think about IP in the early stages. Now, the next thing, I don't think people should go most companies shouldn't go very far beyond that very early. Probably the no man's land is to be like 10 to 20 patents in, 10 to 30 patents in, without a business strategy around how you're going to monetize those patents. So if you're going to monetize your patents through licensing or through building stuff and stopping competition from getting in your space, then you need a lot of patents, and then you should be going for it, and you should be raising money, or you should be generating income that can invest into developing 50, 100 patents. You should go for it. But if you're just, coming up with some new bells and whistles, I don't think you really need to spend your money, which it's not very freely available today. I don't think you should be spending your money on patents. I think you should develop product market fit. I think that you should develop an understanding of how big your opportunity is. And then once you realize the financial value of the patent, then you should go back and file them. So most companies fit into that bucket where they should wait and see with options open. Once you decide you actually know how to use patents to really make money, then you might need to go really big, and you might need to invest in in-house lawyers. You might need to invest in in-house patent agents, and think in terms of like hundreds, not tens.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I appreciate how you laid that out from kind of the early stages, what exactly you want to have in mind when you're first starting out, and to kind of be proactive in protecting assets you might be developing that you don't even know the potential of them in the future as they evolve, all the way up to like maybe this is part of your business model, and then you're, might be running the patent game the whole time, right? So you need to bring it in-house and have those lawyers on the team and all of that sort of thing. So thank you. That's really helpful. And I think that it's a nice kind of guide when people are trying to start to tackle and think about even the right questions to ask is super helpful.
Can I throw one more thing in on that topic?
Absolutely.
Because I think this is super important. Most advice around patents come from lawyers, especially when you're in the incubator world. So like in incubators or accelerators like an M-Hub, they'll have lawyers come in and talk to the cohort companies about patents. Lawyers are really fantastic at understanding how to perfect the legal rights, how to write the claims, what the stages of the process are, all of that. But the thing is that lawyers are like the way to get it done. They're not the way to build the strategy.
Yeah.
And so one of the best pieces of advice I've received really early in the company, and that I love to pass on to entrepreneurs, is you should try early as possible to align with a business person, not a lawyer, that can tell you like what IP looks like in your space. How do people use it to make money? That will inform your strategy. And then absolutely, you'll need those lawyers to execute the strategy. Yeah. But the lawyer should be a small part of the strategy. The business people should be the bigger part of forming the vision and the strategy. And they're not as easy to find, unfortunately. But if you set out to look for those people that really understand financial return and ROI on intellectual property in your field, it can be one of the best mentors or advisors or board members you could ever find.
We've mentioned mHub a few times. You're a board member and also talked about some of your experience mentoring and having mentors throughout your kind of journey. So I'd love to hear how you think, a space like this can, why you like to be a part of a space like this, and how you think this was of value to your team over the years. You talked a little bit about when you first met Bill, you guys were in different spaces, but still kind of it was useful to have that, I think, kind of collaboration and those folks to run to in different situations. Just kind of elaborate on the value of those spaces. And even early on, we talked about the value of interdisciplinary perspectives, which I think is a huge part of that as well.
Yeah. I've yet to come across a business that is easy, even the ones that are wildly successful in retrospect. I mean, they're still hard once they've reached that like success level, but they were really hard to get there. Businesses are tough, and they're especially tough when you have scarce resources. You don't have a lot of options. It's kind of like the difference between selling this product or not making payroll and shutting down the company. Those type of challenges are just really hard to parse through on your own. And so network is essential at every level of running a business that I've been a part of. And I don't expect it to stop. The further we get in our journey and the more success we've been able to create, I would say the more important the network gets. Now it gets to be a different type of network. And you can go to the top of a Bill Gates, a Warren Buffett. Their networks are probably one of their most valuable assets that they have, and their goodwill in their own personal brand and why people trust them and think about them when they have a certain problem. Why does someone think about Bill Gates? Why do they answer the phone when he calls? Mm-hmm. I think it just keeps getting more and more and more important, but it already starts at like a 99 out of 100 important. So if your way to start building a network, one great way that's been created in the last 10 years or so, or 20 years since like Y Combinator and stuff, is this idea of accelerators or co-working spaces. Community matters so much. So whatever the method is, whether it's joining a place like an mHub or applying to a program like a Y Combinator, you have to build network. Like, I've never met an entrepreneur that's done it on their own all the way through. Now, you have to find your network somehow.
Absolutely. Something I want to also emphasize on top of that is the value of in-person, I think, interaction, because obviously we're doing more and more remote. And I think it's amazing on the one hand, of course, how it's made certain opportunities more accessible, and connecting with folks online isn't, not worth something, of course. But I'd love to hear how often like your team meets in person, and how often, you said you come here sometimes a few times a week and whatnot. Why do you think in person still matters?
It matters a ton. And like, I love that you're asking this question, because I sense that you're quite a bit younger than me. And I feel like people in the newer generation of the workforce, they're kind of like, oh, I can get my job done by being remote. And in fact, I can get my whole job done and walk the dog and work out and be at happy hour by 5:00. And none of that's not true. I don't disagree with that. The problem is that when people my age or older, the way we learned above our position was by being on site with people that were doing the bigger job above us and above them.
You get to see what's happening.
Those magic opportunities, like for me, I was at a law firm for a while, and some of the most magical opportunities, they suck in the moment, but it's when you're in the office in New York at 3 a.m. trying to figure out how to get a regulatory variance around a rare breed of owls so that you can put a wind farm up. And it's like how the partner who's right there with you, who's 30 years in the seat, is thinking about how to get the job done. Mm-hmm. You'll never get that over Zoom, because they're not going to call you at 3 a.m. and get you on a Zoom call. No. You're just not in the deal. And so I think from people who are ambitious, so people listening to this, whether it's within a company, whether it's as an entrepreneur, I mean, one of the clearest ways to differentiate yourself today is just to show up. And that's, which is crazy.
Yes,
it's crazy to say that, but just recognize the difference between showing up in person and showing up digitally. And right there, you're automatically starting to separate yourself from, 30, 40% of other people. And that's a big deal.
But we have a few kind of fun, more rapid fire questions, I guess, at the end that I'll run through now. So what's one thing outside of technology that's been inspiring you lately?
So something that's been inspiring me lately, but not just new, but I would say it's just nature. So specific example, I just went to Joshua Tree with my children, and doing things like that. I love, like, it's not technical for sure, but it's inspiring because you see like systems and how they work, and like kind of the miracle of how every little thing in that environment fits together. And to me, that has this isn't why I do it, but like it has direct correlation to companies, to hardware systems, to products, to process. It's like nature is such an inspirational force for like, over billions of years, how it all came together to be the way it is.
It's been like optimized to the most efficient system. Absolutely. Yeah. And it somehow manages to be like gorgeous at the same time, which is totally inspiring. To be totally efficient and beautiful is, I would say, pretty inspirational. Absolutely. Yep. And the goal. That's awesome. Joshua Tree is so much fun. And so that's awesome. Was it your first time there with your kids?
To that specific park, yeah.
Yeah. It's cool how it's really been, I feel like, becoming more and more popular. I didn't even know much about it. I mean, and I grew up in San Francisco, and grew up in California, and didn't go there literally until maybe 3 years ago or so for a friend's birthday. We went out there, and there's so much cool stuff going on there, and I think it's kind of growing cool new restaurants and things like that too.
You did the redwoods and stuff though growing up, right?
Yes, definitely, and like Yosemite and everything up north, absolutely. But Joshua Tree didn't really come on my radar until I was in LA, of course. But yeah, beautiful place, so that's super fun. And then, what would you say is on your personal bill of materials?
My personal bill of materials. So basically what gets me going. Like,
it's totally up to your interpretation.
All right. My personal bill of materials. Coffee every morning, like can't function without that. That's my PCB, right?
There you
can't
go.
even build the circuit without that. My family, I'll think about more material stuff. So like my Vespa scooter. So that's like a rare one. That's like so that's how I got here. Super quick. You get around quickly. It's fun. It feels great. I love that. That's like probably the most materialistic thing I actually like. Most things I'm more of an experience versus like a things.
Yeah.
So coffee, the scooter, good food. I live here in the city about 6 blocks that way. I work about 5 blocks that way. So I love being in this urban environment, and love the restaurants, love going to cool new places with my kids and my wife. I like the energy. No,
that's great. I think that's an awesome list. And I love the picture you were starting to paint with the PCB. This is my base layer, the coffee. And then we have the different components that make it all work. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing with us all of your expertise and experience, and kind of your career journey, and how, NuCurrent has evolved over the years. Really excited to kind of keep up with what you all are working on. And I'd love to give you the opportunity, if there's anything you want to shout out, how people can also keep up with what you all are up to, or any new projects you're working on. Now's the time.
Yeah, well, there's one thing. So if anyone's interested in hearing more like technical depth, or like more about specific industries, we do produce something called Proof Points. We put it up on LinkedIn and YouTube. So, there's stuff on there about medical devices, smart glasses, consumer electronics, audio, physics, like some deep nerdy stuff on there too. So that would be the place to follow up with us. And other than that, like, I hope everyone listening over the next few years is some way or another a customer of NuCurrent by virtue of their wearables, by virtue of their packages they have delivered, or whatever
they might not even realize, but
that's the hope.
Now they'll know to look into it.
Yep, that's the hope.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacob. We'll definitely drop the link to the proof points into our show notes as well, so people can find it there and know where to keep up with more from NuCurrent and from you. So thank you so much again for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks.
That was Jacob Babcock, the CEO of NuCurrent, sharing his experience with the rapidly evolving technology behind wireless charging and offering advice for young designers and engineers. This has been The Bomb, Engineering a Path Forward. If you like The Bomb, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow Supply Frame and Hackaday on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Design Lab at Supply Frame Design Lab on Instagram and Twitter. The Bomb is a Supply Frame podcast produced by me, Magenta Strongheart, and Ryan Tillotson. Written by Maggie Bowles and edited by Daniel Ferreira. Theme music is by Anna Hogbin, show art by Thomas Schneider, special thanks to Giovanni Salinas, Bruce Dominguez, Thomas Woodward, Jin Kumar, Jordan Clark, the entire Supply Frame team, and you, our wonderful listeners. I'm your host, Magenta Strongheart. See you next week.